Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. A Heart of Ice and Ash. Blurb. Winter has only ever experienced love for a brief period in her life. After her mother is murdered by rogues, her father and brother hold her responsible despite her being only 5 years old then. That's when the maltreatment and harassment begin. When she's spurned by her mate during their initial encounter, she doesn't even resist, being accustomed to disappointment in her life. Yet, her mate didn't completely dissolve the mate bond, and when a traumatic event occurs with Winter, she turns mute, quiet, unable to trust anyone or anything anymore. She escapes, eventually meeting her second-chance mate who is not exactly what she anticipated. Will he manage to dismantle the walls she has built and reveal to her the meaning of love? Ultimately, Winter is compelled to understand that at times, it is necessary to trust, not solely the individuals around you but also in yourself. Episode 1. Chapter 1. Winter's POV. I stare into his eyes and I don't even bother trying to struggle when I feel his hands wrap around my neck, instead staring up at what I see as a monster, as he tries to strangle the living breath out of me, my blue eyes swimming with unshed tears as he tightens his grip. Another punishment, another day. Stupid, my father snarls and I say nothing, lying there like a limp rag doll as he finally lets go, breathing heavily and coughing as I roll over and try to breathe some oxygen into my lungs. I feel a sudden sharp pain against my rib cage and close my eyes, knowing that he's kicked me once again and struggle to my feet, knowing that he's most likely cracked one of my ribs or even more. It's not the first time and it won't be the last. I can go and get you your drink now, I splutter, my throat now extremely sore, and he backhands me as I taste blood on my lip, a hand to my face as my cheek begins to throb. God, that hurt. Do it, you stupid cow, he mutters, heading over to our threadbare couch and plunking himself down on it, his legs on the coffee table as he settles himself, turning the television on as I limp into the kitchen to fetch him his beer. He takes it without a word and I wait, dreading what he's about to ask of me and knowing that if I don't get it done in time, that I'll face an even more severe punishment. You're probably wondering what I've done to deserve this type of treatment from my father, and I can tell you, it's because he blames me for my mother's death. My mother died from protecting me against a rogue when I was a small child, and ever since then, I've suffered abuse from my father and even my older brother Damian, who blames me for it. Nothing I say or do makes them stop, and I've since stopped trying. Maybe I do deserve this. My mother would still be alive if it wasn't for me. Listen, you ugly useless girl, my father snaps from his seat, the beer bottle now empty, and he waves his hand at me as though letting me know, even as I flinch from his harsh tone. I'm used to the insults, but for some reason I can't explain, I still react to them. It still hurts me, deep inside, to have my own father treat me this way. Go and cook me some dinner already and get me another beer, he cries, throwing the bottle at me. I dodge just in time, dismayed when it smashes into the wall and shatters everywhere. Now I have yet another mess to clean up on top of everything else, not that he cares. I'm just a maid to him and my older brother. I give him the beer and head into the kitchen, perusing the meager contents. Whatever food we have is because I get it before the money runs out from my father's constant drinking. Finally, I settled on chicken and salad, doing my best to make a decent hearty meal out of so few ingredients. I, of course, put just a sliver of food on my plate, anything more and he'll throw it out and tell me I'm too fat to be eating. If he doesn't, then I know that Damian will. He copies my father in an attempt to get his approval and makes my life just as much of a living hell. Apparently, thank goodness, the dinner I make is acceptable because all I get is a grunt as I hand it over, before dropping to my knees and picking up the shards of glass scattered everywhere. There's so many of them and I cringe as I cut my hand on a small sliver of glass. So far, Damian has yet to come home, something that is not too unusual, and I'm extraordinarily grateful. Because as bad as my father is to me, my older brother is far worse and not only torments me at home, but also at school, where there is no escape for me. It's like a game to him. My father never picks on him, in fact, adores his only son. Lucky Damian. The only person he hates is me. I feel a tear well up in the corner of my eye. My life means nothing to me anymore. All my hopes and my dreams? All I can focus on is getting away from this useless pack and studying at a college where no one can find me. Because if I don't do that, then there's every likelihood that at this rate I'm going to end up dead. Why don't I tell the Alpha and Luna, you ask? Because they are friends of my father's and we live on the edge of the territory line, far away from everybody else, so no one ever hears me, or whimper. I'm never taken to the hospital, so there's no record of abuse. I want so badly to run away from all of this, but there's nowhere for me to go. I have no other family, no friends, no hope. Everything has been taken away from me. Once upon a time, my brother adored me, but now him and his friends take pleasure in joining me, and my life is a complete and utter nightmare because of those who are meant to love me the most. My family. My name is Winter and I'm 17 years old. This is my story, my life, my pain. Family used to mean everything to me, but now I wish that my father was dead and sometimes even Damian too. I'm so full of hatred, it's all I can do to hide it instead of letting it loose. I will never truly be free until I leave this life, and God help me. I hope it's soon. Damian. POV. It's nighttime and I'm hanging out with my best friends, and laughing at their stupid jokes, beer in hand, all of us in the forest and blatantly smoking weed while drinking. Like we give a report if one of the patrols comes across us. It's not like Dad cares what I do. Hey bro, my best mate, Thomas says, tossing me another one. How's your sister going? He teases me and I roll my eyes. Even to me, it's plainly obvious that he's got a bit of a crush on her. Not that I'll let him near her. Yuck. She's not my sister, I snap back, thoroughly irritated, and you know it. She's the reason my mother is dead and I hate her, I exhaled, taking a sip of my beer while my other friend Jonathan chortles. I gotta say, man, she's hot stuff though, he says, and I turn to him threateningly. What do you mean by that? I hiss, and he shuts up instantly, recognizing that he's gone too far. I'm not being protective of my sister, on the contrary, but that doesn't mean they can make remarks about Winter like that either. Stay away from her, I counter, she's nothing but trouble. Just ask my father, I add darkly, the only thing she's good for is housework, I mutter, and they nod, content to sip their beers and say nothing at all, just chill and hang out. It's far more relaxing in any case than going home, that's for sure. Man, I had better get back before Mother comes looking, Jonathan says bitterly with a scowl. She's been on my case since we all got suspended from school, he adds, speaking sarcastically, and I give him a sympathetic look as he ambles off. In my case, my father could care less what happened when it came to my school work, let alone if I bother to do it, which in itself was a blessing. All he cares about Winter and what she's done to both of us. How about you, dude? I ask Thomas, wanting him to stay a little longer with me. But he just sighs and puts out his blunt, looking regretfully at me. I guess he even has trouble with his parents. Same, my parents are none too pleased about the suspension either, he says grimly. Dad threatened to kick me, not that he would, of course, but it makes him feel better about it if it looks like he cares. I grimace. I have met Thomas's parents and they aren't exactly a cakewalk either. "What are you going to do tonight?" asks Thomas as I put out my own blunt and take a swig of my beer, effectively finishing it in one gulp. I raise my eyebrows at him and shrug my shoulders, not really fussed about what I'm doing. I finally get to go to school tomorrow after a week away, and I can't think of anything better than seeing Po or defenseless little Winter being bullied by my friends and the popular group at school. I wonder if she's still up or if she's gone to bed, if Dad is drunk, just like any other night. "I guess I'll go home," I said with a sigh. "Maybe I'll get lucky and Winter will still be up to tease." I add, laughing to myself just a little at the thought, and, of course, Thomas laughs, clapping me on the back and walking away as I throw the beer bottle on the floor and smash it, walking in the opposite direction. I know I'll have to head home. There's no point staying out here by myself, especially since all of the beer has been drunk and the weed smoked. But I also know what to expect when I get home, and I'm not looking forward to it. My dad can be a right when he's flat out drunk, which is almost every single night. Sometimes he'll yell insults at me, but the majority of the time they are screamed at Winter. She bears the brunt of it, has been since she was 5 years old and Mother died. Part of me felt sorry for her initially, but now all I can see is Mother's grave in my mind and the feeling passes. I put my hands in my jean pockets and begin to saunter towards the house, taking my sweet time as though I can prolong it for as long as possible. I cringe at the thought of having to carry Dad to his bedroom again. Lately his drinking has gotten worse, and I know, Winter probably as well, that it won't be too long until the old man loses yet another job due to his drinking. It wouldn't be the first time, but he's always worse when that happens. I shudder. Maybe I'll get lucky tonight and he'll have passed out in his room. That would be a blessing in itself. As I walk back towards home, I suddenly come to the realization that none of my schoolwork due the next day has been done, and give a wry smile. It looks like there's something I can make Winter do for me after all. She was smarter than I was, easily gets me good grades when I make her do my homework. If she was sleeping, I would just wake her up. After all, it's not like she really has a choice. She'd do as I say or face the consequences. I might not be as forceful as Dad can be, but Winter knows that it's best to obey me and do whatever I give her. I smirk to myself as I open the door and go in search of my little sister. "Oof!" she cries out as I throw my backpack at her, and I barely spare her a glance. "Do my homework tonight," I snarl, and ignored the defeated look on her face. She looks close to tears as I leave, but I harden my heart. Winter's POV. I force myself to wake up early the next morning, in order to get ready for school. I'm so tired I can barely see straight, and it's all I can do to make myself get in the shower and get dressed. Damian came home late last night and insisted on me doing his schoolwork, and when I didn't move fast enough for his liking, he punched me in the stomach, not to mention threw his school bag at me. It was an extremely long night, spent doing my homework on top of his as well. God, I hate him. I couldn't help myself, stopping to turn and look into the battered mirror atop my shabby dresser. I'm not surprised by the large dark circles under my eyes or the thinness of my figure. I hate the way I look, and I know that I'm ugly. My face is pale, so white rather than porcelain, my eyes a dull blue and my hair a frizzy blonde that's long and lanky. No matter how much I washed my hair, it never seemed to make a difference. My clothes are ripped, hand-me-downs from OP shops, jeans with holes in the knees and a sweater twice the size of me that hangs down way past my knees. I didn't really have anything better to wear, and I put my threadbare sneakers on with a grimace. The bottom of them are thin from overuse, and I know that one day soon I'm going to have to go and look around the thrift shops and find a new pair to use. I have barely got the bacon in the pan sizzling and pancakes going, when my father staggers in, looking pale and exhausted, his eyes red and puffed up as he sits there, impatiently waiting for his food. He looks a mess and I hope he cleans himself up before going to work, because at this rate he'll lose his job. Not that that seems to bother him though. Here's your coffee, I say very quietly, placing it beside his elbow and vehemently hoping he would just drink it this time instead of flinging it away. Apparently, he was too tired to do that this time and he drank it down without a qualm or complaint. Damian also staggered in and sat down at the table, glaring at me while he waited, drumming his fingers on the table as I hurried as best I could. Just once, I wish they would get off their lazy backsides and give me a hand. It wouldn't exactly kill them to help, would it? Besides, he is old enough to make his own breakfast for heaven's sake. I don't dare tell him that though, I'm not exactly in the mood for another bruise. Here I tell them softly, placing their large plates in front of them and going back to the bench where my one measly piece of bacon and a slice of toast waits. It's not even enough to touch the sides of my hunger, but I don't dare take any more in case they see me. I stop short when Damian gets up from the table and comes over, eyeing me maliciously. He's up to something, I just know it, and I feel a sense of dread rising inside of me. I try to keep my expression blank so he doesn't see or sense my fear of him. "What do you think you're doing?" he says, and I eye him curiously, my heart already beginning to thump wildly in my chest, anticipating what's about to happen as I hold my breath. "Eating breakfast," I say nervously, and before I can stop him, his hand shoots out and sends the plate flying to the floor as I stare at him and the broken plate in dismay. "What?" "Oops," he says slyly. "Guess you're going without fatty again," he tosses out as he sits and begins to devour his own delicious breakfast. I said nothing. I'm not fat, in fact, I'm anything but, considering I very rarely get to it. But, after all, what would be the point? Damian can do whatever he likes to me and my father will never once step in and stop him, not when he approves of what my brother does to me. I keep my tears to myself, my stomach growling with hunger. I take a deep shuddering breath and bend down to pick up the pieces of the broken plate. I salivate at the sight of the bacon and toast on the floor, but they are covered in dirt and would be disgusting to eat. I force myself to throw them in the bin. A sharp piece of shard slices my finger and I watch the blood drip down in fascination. It doesn't even hurt, nothing does anymore, and I clean it on my sweater as I pick the shards up, sadly knowing that this was to be my only food until dinnertime and that I would be starving hungry again today. Dad and Damian don't care, hurrying out of the dining room when they're finished and leaving me to clean up before I can grab my own school bag and walk to school. Damian's already left in his car, for which I'm extremely grateful, as I don't have to worry about what else he might do to me next, and so has my father, who never even says a word to me, not that I expect him to anymore. This leaves me to take my time, wanting to prolong the experience for as long as possible. School, which used to be a sanctuary when I was smaller, has now become my own hell, a place for bullies and my brother to torment and make fun of me, and I know exactly what I'm facing, my whole body trembling in fear as I began to traverse through the corridors and make it to class, with the hopeful thought that maybe today would be different and that I would be left alone for once. It was a futile hope. Winter's POV. It's lunchtime and I'm sitting outside, my poor stomach growling as it smells the delicious scent of other students eating their lunch, my head hung low and my blonde hair hiding my face as though people wouldn't recognize me. I stood out like a sore thumb. It would take a miracle to get through lunchtime without being accosted by one of my bullies. "Hey loser," I hear and my heart drops. I'd know that voice anywhere, who wouldn't, and I looked up tentatively, the other girl eyeing me with a wicked grin. My heart sinks despite telling myself to get a grip. It's none other than Jessica, the most popular girl in school, her long blonde hair gleaming and shiny in the sunlight, her big blue eyes cold and condemning, her skin a nice golden honey tan and her figure slim and clad in a cheerleader's outfit. She lives to humiliate me, and all I can do is look up from my position on the grass and wait for what I know is coming. I swallow, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. All I want is to just be left alone, in peace. Is that too much to ask? Why does everyone hate me so much? I've never done anything to them, not that they care about something so mundane as that. They live to make fun of me. Sure enough, she's clutching a can of soda which she dumps unceremoniously over my head as I shriek, my hair now dripping of cola as she laughs maniacally, her cheerleader group behind her, giggling behind their hands. It's cold, sticky, and trickles down my clothes as I stand up, letting it drip down my back as I shudder. It's an improvement, laughed Jessica, gesturing towards me as I stare down at the ground. Don't you think her hair looks better, girls? There are choruses of sure does, from behind her, and I hope she's satisfied and that she'll leave now. Instead, she walks right up and swings, her fist connecting to my jaw as I flinch, pain already shooting upwards as I place a hand there, my cheek still sore from the previous day. You should die, it would be much better for you, Jessica sneered, and I felt tears well up in the corner of my eyes, but I was determined to keep them from falling. I haven't done anything to her, but Jessica's in love with my brother Damian and tortures me so that he'll like her back. Little does she know that he can't stand her, she's so oblivious. Thankfully, they all leave me and the bell goes for the next class. I stand up awkwardly, my hair still dripping and feeling incredibly sticky. It's going to be a nightmare to wash out later, but I also can't afford to miss class. My grades are the only thing I have left, and I work hard so that, eventually, when I do graduate, if I make it until then, I'll be able to leave this town and my so-called family and study, far away at a college of my choice. I'm determined to get out of this town, no matter what it takes, and become a lawyer. If I keep my grades up like I have been, I might even be able to organize a scholarship. Lord knows there's no way that my father would even dream of paying for my tuition, and, quite frankly, I'll be glad to leave. I won't be telling them where I'm going either. I'm lost in my thoughts as I walk slowly through the hallway, aware of the strange looks I'm receiving and the whispers going on behind my back as my hair clings to my clothes. Thanks, Jessica, I think to myself sourly, it's just what I needed today. To feel disgusting on top of everything else. My hands clench into fists involuntarily every time I picture her smug little face, wanting to punch her lights out and knock the smile right off her face. Not that I would try, I'd be killed within moments by her groupies. Still, part of me wondered if it might actually be worth it. I make it to my locker, just in time for it to be slammed right onto my hand as I'm trying to pull out the books I need, myself shrieking as it opens again, looking behind me to see none other than my brother doubled over laughing as I try to curl my fingers and can't. Great, he's broken them again. It would heal because of my shifter blood, but it would take hours, and the entire time I'll be in agony. My fingers were already throbbing painfully and I swore silently to myself, Damian giving me one last threatening look before dispersing to his own class. Clutching my hand in the other, I reluctantly headed to my next class, wishing violently that this day would be over already and dreading going home once it was. I only have 2 more classes to get through, and then at least most of today will officially be over. Home is worse than school though, and I can't help but wonder to myself whether or not my life is worth living sometimes. Who would miss me if I was gone? No one, that's who. But then I remind myself that if I did something like that, it would be letting them win, and I refuse to let them break me until I reach that point. No matter what, I will not let them get the best of me. All I have to do is try and be patient until I've graduated. How hard can that possibly be? It's not like things can get any worse than they already are. I will get out of here someday. Until then, I just need to be careful and trust no one. Jonathan's POV. My mother is standing in my doorway, and I roll my eyes and mutter something under my breath. Geez, can't she leave me alone, knowing she can plainly hear me? Good, because right now she's being her usual annoying, overprotective self. Listen, she growls, and I grin, trying to be my usual charming self. I'm trying to make sure you are all ready to go tomorrow. Have you got your timetable? She asks for the 100th time. I laugh. She's given me multiple copies as though afraid I'm going to get lost or something. Yes, mother, I tease, and she gives me a sheepish smile as she fidgets with her hands. I know, she says quietly, I'm overprotective, but ever since your father. It trails in the air and I stiffen, feeling nothing but resentment for the man who supposedly raised me. The man who without a second thought, abandoned his son and rejected his mate for another woman. I hate him. Ever since father decided to leave and make a home with someone else, I reply bitterly, and she sighs. It's a point of contention between us. I hate the man and will most likely kill him on sight, whereas my mother is more soft-hearted and more likely to forgive him. Can you please just try and make this school work, she pleads, and I frown. It's true that this is the third such school I'll be attending, but it's not my fault that I refuse to take crap from no one. As an alpha, it's my right to demand respect even when mother doesn't quite see it that way. She doesn't truly know what high school is really like and how hard it is to avoid fighting with other shifters. I'll try, I grunt, making no promises, and she gives me a genuine smile. Thanks, she murmurs, coming over and eyeing me critically. I frown. What is she doing now? Is she criticizing my clothes? I look down at myself, satisfied with what I see. I've chosen my usual leather jacket and plain shirt topped with ripped jeans and sneakers. Unfortunately, I still resemble that father of mine with my black shaggy hair and dark green eyes. I hate looking like him, avoiding the mirror at all costs. It hangs there broken now, after I put my fist through it one day in a full-blown rage. You might find your mate, my mother is saying excitedly, and I give a cynical laugh. A mate is the last thing on earth I want, especially after seeing what my mother went through with my father, who rejected her when I was 5. To me, love doesn't exist, and it's the last thing I want or need in my life. Love is just a fairy tale. The school is a shifter school, so while it could be likely, I feel sorry for any girl that has the misfortune of being my mate. Because I won't be accepting her, no way. I have every intention of rejecting the girl and living my life the way I want to, and it doesn't involve being tied down or having a family. I don't want any more burdens to deal with. My mother looks disappointed. She knows how I feel about mates, but it doesn't stop her from hoping that one day I'll change my mind. I know I won't, though. It would take a pretty special girl for me to ever consider it, and from what I've seen from girls at every single high school I've visited, they are all shallow, vain creatures who wouldn't even so much as help someone in need. Too self-centered and constantly worrying about their looks. If I did want a mate, I'd want a kind, caring girl who wasn't so fussed with her looks and was genuinely down to earth. I almost snored at my fanciful thoughts. Not gonna happen, I remind myself. Sorry, mother, but any mate of mine is going to be instantly rejected, I drew, watching as her eyes lost their sparkle. I hate hurting her in this way, but she refuses to give up on me. She bites her lip but hesitates to say anything more, heaving a large sigh as she turns towards the doorway. I feel a slight pang of guilt which I wash away. It's not my fault she wants something from me that I'm not willing to give. Life is unfair, if anything, my father has taught me that. You know, she said softly, stopping for a moment and looking over her shoulder, her big brown eyes full of what looked like sadness, or maybe it was pity. Either way, I don't like it one bit. Having a mate is the best thing that can happen to any shifter. I wish you could see that, she whispers. Not every shifter is like your father or every relationship doomed to fail. Your mate will love you, Jonathan, keep that in mind, will you? And she leaves as I stare at the back of her with a scowl on my face. She just doesn't understand me at all. There is nothing on this god-green earth that will ever change my mind when it comes to having a mate, or rather the lack of one. I decide to go and do some training, work some of my anger out of my system before school tomorrow. An alpha needs to stay in shape after all. Besides, maybe it will help me calm down and become more focused. School should be interesting tomorrow, I think to myself with a big smirk on my face. The school wouldn't know what hit them when I got there tomorrow and took over. I'm the alpha and no one would dare disobey my commands, not if they wanted to keep their heads attached to their bodies at any rate. Winter's POV. I don't know how much more of everything I can possibly take. Every day it's the same old story, the same boring routine and the bruises that never seem to fully heal, before they are taken over by new ones, either from my brother or my father, let alone the kids at school. I'm currently in the shower frantically trying to wash my hair due to the soda it took earlier during the day. It's so sticky and horrible, even smells slightly, and I wrinkle my nose in disgust. At this rate, it might take another shower later to get it fully out of my hair. Or I'll have to cut it, something I flat out refuse to do no matter how long it takes to get this stuff out. Finally, I've done what I can to get rid of the sticky residue and I step out, stopping short as I see none other than my brother Damian sitting on my bed, looking amused at my terror. There's a broad smile on his face and I instantly tense when I see it. He holds up a book and I feel my heart sink. I've got so much homework already and he was going to add to it. I silently breathe and count to 10. Please don't hit me, I think to myself. I'm still hurting from earlier today. Maybe he'd leave me alone? Maybe there was something else he wanted, but I very much doubt it. Calm down, Damian says, sounding impatient even as I flinch, waiting for the inevitable slap or punch that was usually forthcoming. To my surprise, it didn't come. I start to relax even though I know that it's possible he'll still hit me. I just want to give you my homework, he says and tosses the book. I catch it awkwardly and he eyes my hand, the fingers having been bent back to straight but so painful it is all I can do not cry out in pain. He sees it and his eyes narrowed for a moment. For a moment, there was silence and I see something flash in my brother's eyes. I blinked, astonished. Had I just seen concern in his gaze for a moment or was I hallucinating? Since when does he show even an ounce of concern when it comes to me? It's enough to shock me. He bites his lip as he gets up and ambles towards the doorway. I stand still, expecting him to just leave, or hit me, but again he catches me by surprise. Word of warning, he mutters under his breath, my ears straining as I heard his words. Father's downstairs and drinking again, he breathes, almost as though he's trying to warn me, and I feel my heart skip a beat. Great, that's the last thing I need to deal with today, even though I'm used to it now. Then, just like that, he's gone. I'm astonished by his concern, but it's fleeting as I feel dread rise in my gut. There would only be one reason father is home this early, and it's because he's either left work early or because, once again, he's lost his job. I suspected the latter. I want frustration, bang my hands against the door and just give vent to the feelings I hide inside, but instead, I just bite my lips, so hard that I can taste blood before I venture downstairs to make dinner. I try to be as quiet as I can so that I don't draw any attention to myself. If I'm lucky, he might even be completely passed out. I actually pray that he is as I make my way towards the kitchen. When Damian said father had been drinking, he hadn't been kidding. Halfway down the stairs and I could smell the putrid scent of alcohol combined with his sweaty, disgusting body odor from never showering. It's actually a miracle that it's taken this long for him to lose whatever job he was currently doing. His hygiene is disgusting. The smell is disgusting and I shudder and try to tiptoe down the steps. In times like these, when he drank worse than normal, it was best to be as quiet as possible, invisible if you can manage it. But he heard me and turned from the couch. I watched him get to his feet, staggering, a beer bottle in his hand, his eyes beady and puffy, red from his alcoholism, the scent of his unwashed body drifting over me. He has a small twisted smile on his face as he gets close, his breath stinking to high heaven as I try not to gag. I wait, feeling sick to my stomach and instinctively back away slightly, knowing that whatever is about to happen isn't going to be anything good. He's staring too hard at me to hope it's just my imagination. Then again, when was it anything nice, I think to myself sourly. I considered making a run for the door, but that would only delay the inevitable and I would have to go home eventually, face the music, and by then Damian would most likely join in my punishment. I brace myself and hope that whatever is coming will be over quickly and I can get to cooking dinner, my stomach growling loudly in hunger. Maybe he'll just throw insults at me if he's too drunk to hit me accurately. Well, if it isn't the little murderer, he says in a slurred voice, and I flinch instinctively while he gives a derisive laugh. He's clearly drunk, so many beer bottles scattered around the floor that even I'm astonished. It's a lot more than his usual amount. How long has he been drinking while I've been upstairs? I said nothing, knowing that it was best not to provoke him any further. That will just make him even angrier than he already is. He waves the beer bottle threateningly in my face and I hesitantly take a step back. It was still half full of liquid and heavy in his hand, not that he appeared to notice, too busy studying me with pure hatred in his eyes. I'm not a murderer. I chant silently to myself, but it's so quiet, almost as if I'm starting to believe I am. I've been told it so many times. I'm so used to his hatred and contempt that I don't even react to it. Then he swings his hand high up in the air and I try to move, try to run, but he grabs me by the hair and pulls until I stand still, my eyes closed, tears dripping down my cheeks. I feel nothing but a sharp pain in the top of my head before everything turns to darkness and I no longer know if I'm dead or alive. Right now, being dead would be considered a blessing. Damian POV. I don't know what's come over me lately, but I'm no longer enjoying the cruelty I usually show to my younger sister Winter. There's just something about the way that she stares at me, so much pain in her gaze, that I feel a flash of guilt. If our mother was still alive, then Winter would still be happy and a go-lucky child or teenager, but instead she's grown up in a house full of abuse. I never used to mind, but lately it has been weighing heavily on my conscience. My mother would be upset to see the way that father and I treat her. She loved Winter so much. Died protecting her little girl. I sigh. I guess that's why I warned her about our father being on the warpath. Normally I wouldn't, but today I felt like I needed to. The drunken old man had gotten himself fired again, but I guess that's what happens when you constantly turn up to work either drunk or severely hungover. I've lost count of how many jobs he's been fired from. It's quite pathetic, really. I know that he misses Mum, but surely he needs to move on at some stage? The last time I suggested that though, he turned on me and I'm not planning on trying to get him to move on anytime soon. Something seems wrong, my stomach churning and nausea coming to the surface and, for whatever reason, I can't get rid of a niggling feeling in my gut, turning to my friends and blowing them off as they protest. Whatever this feeling is, I sense I need to go home. They can deal without me for one night, for heaven's sake. It's not like they don't see me at school every day. Well, at least on the days I bother to go. I rush back to the house but don't run. The entire time I try to convince myself that everything is fine and that I'm just overreacting. After all, my gut could be wrong, couldn't it? I didn't even like facing my father when he was on a complete bender. He houses quiet, too quiet as I let myself in, my father snoring wildly in the recliner, a beer bottle loosely clutched in his hand. Where was Winter? Dread rises up inside of me. Normally, she would already be in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner, but I couldn't see her from my position. Nor could I sense her anywhere, but I could smell the disgusting metallic scent of blood in the air and my heart sinks. I know instinctively that it's Winter's because father is not bleeding from any wounds that I can see. I went round the corner and stopped, absolutely horrified, all the blood draining out of my face. I can't believe my eyes and I force the bile down that tries to rise in my throat. Winter is lying there on the cold hard ground and she looks like a rag doll, both of her eyes closed, completely unconscious. There is red blood pooling around her head and I can see its change of color, some of it old. How long had she been lying there like that for? God, what had father done? This was the first time I'd seen her in such a bad state. Something occurs to me and I bend down and wrinkle my nose at the smell of her blood, relieved to see her chest rising and falling. She was breathing at least and had a pulse even if it seemed a little weaker than normal. I feel a small sprinkle of relief. What have you done, old man? I say grimly, bending to pick her up, feeling her head draped against me and, for some inexplicable reason, I find myself feeling protective of her. I shake the feeling off. I can't afford to be merciful towards her, no matter how much I was softening. She was the reason for our mother being dead and that I couldn't forgive, no matter how much she begged me to. But was she, I thought? What if she was telling the truth? I had no reason to doubt her story, even though my father was certain that Winter had somehow caused our mother's death. But Winter had only been a child at the time, hardly capable of what our father says she is, and I shake my head, trying hard to clear the dozens of thoughts now flooding my mind. I took her to her room. I can see part of her wound is healing and know that though it will be slow, by tomorrow she'll be fine as though it has never happened. I doubt she would ever forget the memory though, and I feel a tiny bit of grief at that thought. Another unhappy memory to hold onto, the poor thing has very few happy ones. I lay her in her bed and gingerly placed her blanket over the top of her, pausing for a moment as I pondered what to do. Was it safe to leave her in that kind of condition? Would father stay away or did I need to lock the door? I sigh. Father's too drunk to do anything more to Winter and I doubt he was capable, anyway, in his condition. Poor Winter's body had seen worse than this and she'd survived. Something I wasn't exactly proud of. Besides, I couldn't risk being seen in her room helping her. Father would take all of his anger out on me if I did. She can sleep it off, I tell myself, backing away from the door and refusing to look at her face. How innocent my little sister looked when she slept. How vulnerable she suddenly seemed. She'll be fine, she always is. Always will be. The last thing she needs is the brother who torments her staying in her room. I leave without a backward glance, going to my own room. I guess I'll have to do my own homework tonight, I think a tad bit absently, my mind still on Winter's injuries and how broken she seemed. Winter POV God, my head is pounding like you wouldn't believe. I force myself to open my eyes, my throat feeling sore and completely dry as I lick my chapped lips, confused and disorientated. Where was I wondered, looking around the room, realizing it was mine. But how had I gotten here? I distinctly remember being hit on the head by father downstairs and then nothing. I was certain I had fallen unconscious from the pain in my head. So who had put me to bed? I doubted it was father, but it was equally astonishing to think my brother Damian would show that much care towards me. But he was the only one who could have possibly done it, and I feel a small bit of gratefulness towards him. I force myself to roll out of bed, blinking against the bright sunlight and trying not to pain in my head. I feel the back of my hair and can tell it's matted with dried blood, and I groan, it's going to take forever to get it all out, and I'm hoping I won't have to do something horrible like cut it. It's taken forever for me to grow it as long as this. I hurry to the bathroom and am ecstatic to find I'm able to wash it out with a bit of elbow grease, my hand now fully healed along with my head injury. It's the small things in life, I think to myself sourly, to be grateful for. I take my time and tiptoe downstairs, disgusted by the mess that greets me. There are dishes piled everywhere and dozens of empty beer bottles scattered all over the lounge room floor. Thankfully, Father is snoring loudly in the chair, possibly still drunk judging by the smell of him, and I take the opportunity to make breakfast, putting his on the table. There's no way I'm going to wake him up and face his wrath when I have school to get to. For the first time, I almost inhaled my bacon and egg sandwich. No sign of my brother anywhere, and I assume he's gone to school already. Good riddance, I couldn't have been happier this morning. I leave his breakfast out in case and grab my school bag. So far it's been a non-eventful morning, and part of me feels hopeful that it will continue, walking to school uninterrupted by anyone for the first time in months, and I can't believe my good fortune. What was going on? Had the moon goddess taken pity on me? A group of cheerleaders are gathered in the hall, and I instinctively duck my head down and try to cover it with my long hair as I inch past them all. I can hear their conversation clearly, and to my shock no one noticed me as I went past. Too busy with their conversation or possibly gossip. Whatever, as long as it has nothing to do with me, I could care less. Can you believe there's a new kid at school today? That's not all, guess what? I heard he's an alpha. Jessica speaks up and I flinch, still working on getting past them without being caught. I catch her tossing her hair over her shoulder, a massive smile on her face. I just know that he's going to be my mate, it's obvious, she almost purrs while her friends look a bit put out. Trouble in paradise, I think to myself smugly. Looks like her friends also want a piece of this poor alpha kid. What if you're not though? Another one dares to question her and falls silent at the scorching look on her face. He'll still want me, she said smugly, after all, I'm the most beautiful girl in the school. We don't always have to agree to be with mates, we can choose to mark each other. I almost scoff at her blatant display of confidence. Mates are meant to be together forever, and I wonder why she thinks just being beautiful will be enough to get his interest. Were male werewolves really that shallow? Well, she could have him. I doubt with the way I look that I'll even get a glance from him, and that's perfectly fine with me. I prefer to be invisible rather than have attention on me. A group of cheerleaders are gathered in the hall, and I instinctively duck my head down and try to cover it with my long hair as I inch past them all. I can hear their conversation clearly, and to my shock no one noticed me as I went past. Too busy with their conversation or possibly gossip. Whatever, as long as it has nothing to do with me, I could care less. The other girls begin to chat excitedly amongst themselves, and I make it to my locker without incident, grabbing the books I need. My heart sinks a little. With what happened last night, I wasn't able to complete my homework, and I feared what the teacher might say. It wasn't exactly my fault, but it still hurt nonetheless. I hated to let my teachers down. Unless it was beyond my control, like last night when I was unconscious, I passed it in every day without fail, and I knew my grades could take a hit, and it was all because of what my father had done to me last night. I think bitterly as I begin to make my way to my algebra class, feeling angry and full of hatred at the man who was no longer a real father to me. Hopefully, the homework, or rather lack of it, won't affect my grades in any way. If I have to, I'll offer to do extra credit to make it up. I refuse to let my grades fail when I need them for college. The other girls begin to chat excitedly amongst themselves and I make it to my locker without incident, grabbing the books I need. My heart sinks a little. With what happened last night, I wasn't able to complete my homework and I feared what the teacher might say. It wasn't exactly my fault, but it still hurt nonetheless. I hated to let my teachers down. Unless it was beyond my control, like last night when I was unconscious, I passed it in every day without fail and I knew my grades could take a hit and it was all because of what my father had done to me last night. I think bitterly as I begin to make my way to my algebra class, feeling angry and full of hatred at the man who was no longer a real father to me. Hopefully, the homework, or rather lack of it, won't affect my grades in any way. If I have to, I'll offer to do extra credit to make it up. I refuse to let my grades fail when I need them for college. I find myself wondering about this so-called new boy that has everyone so excited. Like we haven't seen an alpha before. Then again there were no other alphas at this school. Most tend to go to private ones over public, I guess because of their status as leaders of their packs. Would this alpha be kind or would he be like the rest of the school and torment me along with them? Or would he keep away from me? Because being bullied by regular shifters is bad, I don't really want to find out how much worse the bullying can get when an alpha decides to join in as well. Jonathan POV. I follow the scent to a nearby classroom and, without warning, I open the door and let it slam open, my eyes scanning each and every face while the teacher glares at me. I glare right back and they blink but say nothing. Even teachers cannot mess with an alpha. I smirk at them while my eyes scan the room for the person I'm looking for. It takes me a minute and then I spot her. My eyes fall on a girl sitting there and looking away from me. She's the only one who is and I study her for a moment. Her hair is blonde, long, but it's her fragile appearance that tugs at my heart. She's so pale, so thin. Does she ever eat? I think to myself sardonically before catching myself. Why do I even care? She had dark circles under her eyes as though she never sleeps and her clothing is easily too big for her, hiding her thin frame, but not from me. Does she ever sleep? I'm beginning to lose focus as I stare at her, the class speaking in hushed whispers that I ignore, debating how to get her to follow me out of the classroom. In the end I decide on a blunt approach, desperate to get this over and done with and move on with my life. I finally say, pointing to her, and she stiffens, turning her face to look at me, blood draining out of her face or so it looks like. She's gone so pale that I wonder if she's about to faint or pass out. I hope not. That's the last thing I want to have to deal with. Come with me, I order using my alpha tone and she's forced to obey, the teacher scowling in the background from the interruption. I don't care. I want to take care of this now before it becomes a problem. I harden my heart, which starts to hurt. My wolf is hating me right now and I'm forced to put up a block in order to stop listening to his threats and complaints. The girl follows me out hesitantly and we step into the corridor. I ran a hand through my shaggy hair and looked at her, feeling a slight pang of guilt for what I was about to do, but I was really not sure what else to do. She deserves a better mate than me, one who will genuinely be able to care for and love her. I'm not that person. I don't even think I'm capable of loving another person, except for my mother, but she's the exception. What's your name? I ask and she bites her lip before looking at me hopelessly. It's adorable. I felt my breath hitch. Everything about her is beautiful, from her golden hair to the tips of her toes. My wolf growls at me in the background, hating my guts. I don't tell him that I already hate myself for doing this to an innocent girl. I keep the block up, even though it pains me that I'm hurting my wolf by doing this. It's Winter, she said very quietly, and my heart skipped a beat. Winter is such a beautiful name and it seems to suit her really well. Unique, just like she was. I gave her a tight smile, feeling incredibly guilty for what I was doing. Listen, Winter, I begin to mutter. This is nothing against you, I add, rambling on a bit while she looks at me as though I'm a crazy person, but I refuse to have a mate and, unfortunately, that happens to be you. I wait for some sort of reaction to come from her, but there's none forthcoming. It's almost like she's off in her own little world. I exhale, but the girl merely shrugs as though it's no big deal. Does she not understand what I'm telling her? Does she not care? It stings a little. My wolf is completely miserable and refusing to speak to me. If it wasn't for the block, he would be taking over my body right now in an attempt to stop me. Can you reject me already so I can get back to class, she mutters. I still have homework to hand in. Well, that sucked. I don't know why, but I guess I was hoping she would put up some sort of fight, refuse to be rejected. This was going to be painful, not just for me but for her as well. I'm taken aback but can hardly complain if that's what I intended to do. I take a deep breath and stare into her gorgeous eyes. I, Jonathan of the Blue Moon Pack, reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent, she supplied. Reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack. I finished grimly and waited as she took a deep breath before doing the same. Reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack. I finished grimly and waited as she took a deep breath before doing the same. I, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, accept Jonathan of the Blue Moon's Pack's rejection, she said dully, and I blinked, surprised by her lack of reaction. Without another word she leaves, not even glancing back at me, and I stare at the back of her with remorse. Had I hurt her feelings? It was impossible to tell. She seemed so detached somehow. As if she wasn't even there. She'd said it so listlessly, as well as though she hadn't expected anything less from her mate, and I felt incredibly sad for the girl I hadn't even met properly before rejecting her so quickly. I felt a slight sting as the mate bond was severed, but nothing more, wondering if Winter even felt the pain. From all accounts, I was expecting it to be a lot more painful. That's how everyone I'd asked made it sound. I don't even know if she was in any pain from the reaction, and considering that it was clear she didn't yet have her wolf, which meant she was younger than me. But she couldn't be too much younger. She had looked so defeated as well, something that was a shock to see in someone as young as her. I sigh. At least it hadn't been awkward and she hadn't even put up a fight. Maybe Winter had wanted the same thing. For all I know, she might not have wanted a mate as well and had been happy to accept my rejection. Maybe I had even done her a favor by rejecting her first. That was a good thing, right? Then why do I feel so awful? Why can't I stop picturing her in my mind? I head to my next class fervently hoping that it's not one with Winter in it. That would be even more awkward. But then I remember she's younger than me and inwardly rejoice, knowing I won't have to look at her in any of my classes. I drop the block and my wolf steadfastly refuses to speak to me, sulking in the background. I shrug. He'll get over it eventually and realize I did the right thing. To love is to get hurt, he should remember that. Winter POV. I'm sitting in class, listening to the teacher, who I'll admit was rambling a bit when the door to the classroom crashes open. I don't even have to turn to know it's the new alpha everyone's been talking about. The teacher thankfully falls silent and everyone begins to talk while I wonder what it is he wants. He smells nice, I think drowsily, like sandalwood and bergamot, and I inhale deeply, my eyes suddenly narrowing as I work out why that is. There's only one reason another person would smell this good to me, and that's if they are my mate. Sure enough, he points at me. You, he says gruffly, and I try not to flinch at the authority oozing from his voice. Come with me. He strides back out and I'm forced to follow, the class erupting into giggles as I leave. Great! More fodder for the gossip mill. I can't help but stare at him in awe. His face is just so handsome, his green eyes round and dark, his black hair shaggy and down to his shoulders. He's wearing a leather jacket that makes him look tough, as well as accentuates his muscled body. I swallow, feeling incredibly nervous all of a sudden as he turns to speak to me. I'm not naive. I knew he'd brought me out here to reject me. After all, what guy would want a girl as broken and tainted as I was? I wasn't the greatest looking and compared to him I must have looked awful. But I squared my shoulders, refusing to let him see how this was affecting me. I needed to get this over and done with, if only so I could get back to class and pretend this never happened. I'd dreamed of finding a mate since I was a little girl, and as I'd gotten older, I'd hoped that mine would come along and save me. I should have known better. Listen, can we hurry this up? I mutter. I need to get back to class. He looks stunned, almost as though he wasn't expecting me to say something like that, but I meant every word. The sooner the mate bond is severed, the sooner the pain will be gone. For a moment I'm grateful that I don't have my wolf yet, which means the pain will be far less than if I had one. He takes a deep breath and I wait for the inevitable words. I, Jonathan of the Blue Moon Pack, reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent, I supply, and he nods and continues, almost forcing the words out. Reject you, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, he finishes. I try not to howl at the sharp pain in my heart. I refuse to let him see the pain he's caused me. I, Winter of the Silver Crescent Pack, accept Jonathan's of the Blue Moon's Pack rejection, I say dully, and feel like I'm being ripped in two, trying to keep my breathing even, as I go through the most excruciating pain I've ever felt in my life. I force bile down my throat. For a moment, he looks stunned and I know he's feeling the mate bond sever completely. As an alpha, he won't feel it as much, not with the strength and power he possesses. I give him a tight smile and leave without a backward glance, fighting hard to keep my tears at bay when part of me wanted to cry out my anguish and let my tears flow. Crying wouldn't do me any good. It never did. My feet feel heavy and rooted to the floor as I went back to the classroom, feeling nothing but dread as I slowly turn the handle with a trembling hand. I forced myself to walk back into the room, casually, as though nothing had ever happened. The teacher looks at me and says nothing as I quietly take a seat, and for a moment I think that everything is going to be well. I was fresh out of luck. Looks like somebody got rejected, Jessica drawled from the back corner, and I stiffened, accidentally giving away that in fact had happened. I can feel her malice and hatred from here. Just leave me alone, I whisper, and she gives a loud snort of laughter. I hope the teacher will step in, but they merely look away and I feel deflated. Even the teachers don't care what happens to me. Did he hurt your feelings? Jessica mocked, and I remain silent, breathing deeply in and out as I channel my anger, trying to keep myself from exploding. Why was it so hard for them to leave me alone? I was hurting right now and Jessica was taking delight in it. Winter got rejected, another student shouts, and I groan and put a hand over my eyes as students begin to laugh at my misfortune. I should have gone home or pretended to be sick and gone to the nurse's station. Well, who would want her? Look at her. She's ugly, of course he rejected her. She's pathetic, look at her. No way an alpha would want to be anywhere near her. The whispers continued back and forth, and I put my head on the desk and stare unseeing at everyone, violently wishing for the bell to ring and signal the end of the day. At this rate, I don't even care that going home will be just as painful, I'm that depressed from everything that's happened. The bell finally rings and I could almost jump for joy. Finally, I can get away from this dreadful place and the taunts happening. Except that Jessica and her groupies don't leave like the rest of the class do. I look up into her smirking face and gulp as she looks over at her friends. You know what to do, she tells them, and I get up, try to run, only to get pushed to the ground, all of them kicking me over and over as I, feeling my ribs crack, my chest becoming tight as I struggle to breathe. I place my hands over my head protectively and wait for what seems like a decade until it's over. Stay away from Jonathan, Jessica whispers from the doorway as she and the others leave. I stay curled up in a fetal position and try to breathe. The pain is horrendous and I know that I'll be lucky to get up on my own, let alone make it home. I uncurl myself slowly and sob as I get on my hands and knees, the room spinning around me. I barely make it to a standing position before I feel myself becoming lightheaded. The last thing I hear, before I fall back to the floor and darkness surrounds me, is his voice yelling at the top of his lungs, "Get a doctor here now." Jonathan's POV. I head back to my next class, listening to my wolf's growls and protests, pushing them aside. But something doesn't feel right to me. Why did she look so defeated back there, as though she'd been expecting to be rejected? Mates generally stayed together and I felt a pang as I remembered the sad look in her eyes. She'd looked so broken and I had helped make her that way. Class seemed to take forever and, to be honest, I had no clue what subject I was currently in, let alone did I care. All I could think about was her and the niggling feeling in my gut. Something was wrong, I could feel it and my wolf could sense it. The bell couldn't ring fast enough for me and, to my dismay, I was held back by the teacher, who had a serious look on his face. "Jonathan, I understand you're the alpha, but that doesn't mean not paying attention in class," he said gravely, and I glower at him, causing him to take a step back. My eyes turn pitch black in warning and he babbles something at me and then lets me go. I've never moved faster in my life, packing up my things and dashing out the door. I'll just look in on her and then go home, I say to myself, and my wolf says nothing, instead telling me to run. I remember the last place I'd seen her and make a run to her classroom, surprised to see a crowd of cheerleaders coming out of the room, smug looks on their faces. Almost as though they had done something. When they see me they scatter, making me even more suspicious as I open the classroom door, blood draining out of my face as I see her. Winter had clearly been beaten, holding her ribs, and I watched how she trembled as she got to her feet. I should have moved quicker, reacted, because before I could do anything she fell down again in front of me as I roared, "Somebody get a doctor here now," at the top of my alpha tone, sending students and teachers scurrying to do just that. I kneel in front of Winter and push back the hair covering her face, my heart breaking in two as I stare at the poor girl and her bruised face. She looks so childlike in that instance, so fragile, and I quietly pick her up and cradle her against my chest. Why, she barely weighs anything at all, I notice absently as I maneuver her carefully out of the classroom with me. A nurse comes running and stops as she stares at me and Winter. I growl at her and she blinks. "Follow me," she says, and I follow, my legs feeling like dead weights as we go into the nurse's room. "Put her on the bed," the nurse instructs, and I carefully place Winter down, gently, not wanting to hurt her. She still hasn't woken up. The nurse comes up beside me and gasps as she takes in Winter's condition. "What happened?" she exclaimed, and I give a helpless shrug. "I don't know," I say grimly, "but I intend to find out." The nurse hesitates. "I need to look her over," she says slowly, and I raise my eyebrows at her, refusing to move, and she sighs, unable to order an alpha away. I watch as the nurse slowly peels her shirt and jumper up, exposing her body. I could cry at the amount of injuries and bruises on her body. The nurse blinks back a tear. "Those aren't all new," I growl, and the nurse nods. Some of these are older than others, she agrees, as though she's been beaten a few times. The poor girl, I had no idea, she said, shaking her head. The nurse tenderly feels across her ribcage and I watch in shock as Winter's eyes suddenly open as she inhales in shock. Ouch, she cries and the nurse profusely apologizes. I'm so sorry, she says, and Winter just nods, a tear trickling down her pale cheek. Without thinking, I wiped it away, trailing my finger down her cheek. Winter, I need to examine you. Can you tell me where it hurts? The nurse asks, and Winter points to her ribs, looking exhausted and going quiet. The nurse felt her ribs and I flinch as Winter cries out from the pain, feeling helpless, wishing like anything I can take her in my arms and comfort her, but knowing that I have no right to do so. Not after I've rejected her. You have some broken ribs, the nurse says quietly. I think it's best you go to the hospital. I agree, am about to offer to take her, anything to help her in some small way when she shakes her head and bites her lip. I'll heal, she murmurs, and my mouth falls open. What kind of person refuses to go to a hospital? My wolf is becoming angry at her and so am I. You don't have a choice, I snap with all the anger in my voice I can muster and feel contempt at myself when she jumps startled and winces. I didn't mean to make her do that. I don't have time, she argues, and I refuse to listen to her. Not good enough, I say and fold my arms, staring at her intently as she blushes and stares down at the ground. The nurse hesitates. Winter, sweetheart, you have a lot of older bruises on your body. Is someone hurting you? Something flashes across Winter's face, so quickly I almost miss it. No, she says hastily, and I know instinctively that she's lying. The nurse knows it too from the look on her face, but she decides not to push. That's all right, because I'll be pushing to know the truth once I've gotten this stubborn girl to the hospital. Hospital, I growl, and the nurse turns towards me. She'll need to lie down in the car and you'll have to drive slow or she could get hurt even more than she already is, she advises me, and I nod grimly. I glare at Winter. Stay here, I snap using my alpha tone. It's the only way I can guarantee she won't leave while I fetch my car. Without another word, I head outside, rushing to my car. If I have to drag her inside the hospital, I will. Winter POV. I sit in the bleak-looking hospital room, grateful that Jonathan had the common sense to leave me alone and sit in the hallway. I'm so angry at him for forcing me to come here when I don't want to go. I feel a sense of panic. What if they call my father and tell him I'm here? He'll kill me for sure. I try to hold my tears at bay as a young woman comes walking in, dressed in a doctor's coat. She looks concerned and I wonder if she's been told about my injuries already. I bet Jonathan told her. Winter, the woman says quietly, and I glance at her name tag. It reads Laura. She continues with a smile that I'm sure she means to be reassuring. I hear that you've been badly hurt. Can you show me where? I really need to get home, I say hastily. I was expected to be there ages ago. She frowns. I'm sure your family is worried about you. Would you like me to call them? I shook my head. No, it's fine. I don't want to bother them. She gives me a strange look, but there's no way I want them contacting my father or my brother. I shudder at the thought. It hurts here, I finally mumble as she looks at me, patiently waiting. I know she's not going to leave me alone until I show her, and so I reluctantly push up my shirt and jumper so she can look at my ribs. Laura gently prods my rib cage and I give a yelp, unable to help myself. Christ, that hurt! Now Laura is looking away and I fidget as I see her looking over at my old bruises. Well, she says finally, motioning for me to pull my top and jumper back down, which I do, feeling a lot less vulnerable now that my body is covered. Your ribs are broken. I can wrap them up for you until they heal properly. She offered give you some painkillers to help with the pain. Would you like that? I think about it. Having the painkillers doesn't seem like such a bad idea considering I was in a massive amount of pain. Maybe, if I rationed them, I could keep some for at home when the pain from my beatings get too bad. I'm also not going to complain if she wants to wrap a bandage around my stomach and rib cage to make me more comfortable. At this rate I won't heal until late tomorrow and I want to be able to walk without feeling like I'm going to faint. I give her a small nod and she begins to rifle through her trolley. Lift your shirt back up, Laura orders me, and I do, wincing as she puts the bandage on tight, not enough to restrict my breathing, but firm enough that I felt myself beginning to relax as the pain diminished slightly. I'm hoping she'll just grab the painkillers and let me go, but instead she sits down on the visitor chair and stares directly at me, making me feel extremely nervous. I know what she's about to ask and there's no way I'm going to tell her the truth. I value my life too much. Winter, I can tell that you have old bruises and new ones on top of them. Is there trouble at home? She asks delicately, and for a moment I hesitate. Yes, I want to scream. My own family beat me, starve me, and are cruel to me. Help me. But I don't. I can't, and my chest feels tight as I answer, lying completely to the kind woman I get bullied at school a lot. It's fine. It's not, but I put on a brave face and I can tell she's trying to tell if I'm telling the truth or lying. I fix my big blue eyes on her and it seems to work. We can get the officers down here if you'd like to speak to them. Make a report about the people bullying you. She tries again and I feel bad for her. She's trying to help me and I'm shoving it back in her face. No thank you, I say firmly, and she bites her lip and sighs. It's up to you, she says sadly, and I nod, watching as she leaves, hopefully to grab the painkillers she promised me. To my annoyance he strides in, all confident. I curse myself for thinking he's handsome. He rejected me, for heaven's sake. I shouldn't feel anything for him, but every time he comes near me, my heart gives a flutter as though there's still part of the mate bond between us. I frown at him, but he doesn't seem to notice, or he doesn't care. I'll take you home, he tells me, and I gape at him. I can't have him do that. I can't have him near my house or my family. I can't let him know my shameful secret. It's none of his business. I don't even want to imagine the consequences of having a boy take me home and my father seeing it. Heck, Damian would punish me for it as well and make fun of me. I can't stand the thought and I feel my body starting to tremble. I really need those painkillers, I force out, and like I had hoped he sprung around to go and fetch the nurse. I wait for a minute and sure enough when I peer around the corner he's gone. I limp towards the hospital's exit, frantically dashing through, hoping that I'll make it to the main road before he finds me. I've barely taken a step outside though when his voice booms from behind me, stopping all the staff and patients in their tracks. Where are you going? You are hurt, injured and trying to run. How can you be so stupid, he roars, and I flinch and turn around, eyeing him warily. Get back inside your room, he hisses, and I can't ignore him. What would be the point? He'd just use his alpha tone on me anyway, so it would just be a waste of time and energy. It doesn't stop me from stomping over to the bed though and plunking myself down, foolishly forgetting about my broken ribs. I flinch and swear as he glowers at me. Do I have to tie you to the bed, he grumbles, and even though I know it's wrong, my imagination goes into overdrive as I picture him doing just that, dressed in just his underwear, his bare chest. I blink and know that I'm blushing by the amused smirk on his arrogant face. I think crossly and sulkily fold my arms over my own chest, saying nothing, and looking away. Here are your painkillers, Laura announces from the doorway, handing over a small pill bottle, one every 4 to 6 hours as needed. You should be good as new by tomorrow night, she says, looking between the two of us warily. Did I interrupt something? She asks innocently. No, I mumble, and Jonathan shakes his head. Can she be discharged? He asks Laura, and she nods, giving me one last searching look. Unless there's anything else you need or want to do, Winter, she says lightly, and I shrug. Thanks, but I'm all good. I tell her thanks for the painkillers. She turns to Jonathan while I scowl at him. Be careful when driving and try not to stop suddenly while she's in this much pain. Take her straight home, the pills may make her slightly woozy. Hello, I'm standing right here, I think to myself sarcastically. Laura remains oblivious as she gives myself and Jonathan a cheerful wave goodbyes as she leaves us both staring at each other, me resentfully while he looks stony. Well, Jonathan mutters, let's take you home. He exhales and offers me a hand. I ignore it and begin to shuffle towards the exit, knowing I was irritating him. Is it really so hard for you to ask for help? He huffed indignantly, and I stop, leaning against the outside of the building, panting heavily. It was harder to walk than I thought it would be. I'll go get the car, he whistles and strides off as I wince, grimly staring into the distance. How was I going to persuade him to drop me off away from my house so that my father and brother don't see? Jonathan POV. I'm hurrying to the car, aware of Winter's condition. She might seem tough, but right now she looked like a strong wind would knock her over. The car is too far for her to walk to, and I get in and drive around to the front of the hospital, violently hoping she hasn't tried to leave on her own again. I can't believe she tried to do that. She's absolutely mad and the most stubborn girl I know, and I've only known her a few hours. To my relief, she's still where I left her, and I wait, the engine running, for her to come over and get in the passenger seat. I feel bad, but if I try and help, she'll just refuse again. Once she's firmly buckled in, I start to slowly drive off, asking her for her address. She answers, but in a dull voice, as though frightened that I'm driving her home. I'm still suspicious of the bruises that litter her entire body, but I can't prove anything or help if she refuses to tell me. What do you do in your spare time? I ask awkwardly, and she shrugs. Great, she's going to be silent for the remainder of the trip. I try again. So how do you like school? And sigh when she just shrugs and turns to look out the window. We get to her house and I make a move to help her out, but stubborn wench that she is, she waves her arms at me and tells me to stop. I'm not used to this kind of treatment from another shifter, and my wolf is starting to get angry. Not because of her, but because she was refusing help. Even without the so-called mate bond, he remained concerned about Winter. Can you get to your house all right? I call out as she slams the door closed. I close my eyes and try hard to keep patient. I'll be fine, she says testily, and I pull out, looking in the rearview mirror as she begins to shuffle away. I don't trust her. There was something about the way she said it, and the way she hesitated before giving me her address, that niggles at me. Instead of leaving, I travel around the block and park in a side street, cautiously making my way to a tree where I could watch what she did clearly without being so close she would be able to sense me. As I thought, she shuffled right past the house she'd told me she lived in, and hobbled further up the street to one of the most run-down and shabby-looking houses I've ever seen. The grass is completely dead out the front, and the mailbox looks as though it's been run over several times, completely on a lean. The front door's paint is peeling, and there's empty beer bottles near the front door which she uses her foot to nudge away. I watch closely as she places a key in the lock. There's no emotion on her face, almost as though she's detached, but that could be due to her pain maybe? She's clearly poor, I think to myself. Maybe that's why she didn't want me to drop her off? It made sense, but something still rankled. Why would she not at least tell the nurse about her old bruises? I don't believe for a second that it's due to bullies at school. There are far too many of them. As it was, I would be having a firm talk with the principal tomorrow about his failure to protect one of his students from a vicious and violent attack. The fact they were girls didn't matter to me. They deserved to be punished, and as much as my wolf would have loved to get his hands on all of them, I had to let the school handle this. Winter walks into the house and I hear a small thump as the front door closes and the click of a lock. Then nothing but silence. I wait, for what I don't know, eventually giving up. She was fine, probably doing homework. My wolf is still uneasy, but I can't hang around forever. I make a note to swing past again tomorrow afternoon without telling her, if only to ease my own curiosity. Part of me wonders what her bedroom looks like, whether she has personal items in it or if it was as bare as the rooms in the house. I could see the living room from here and it contained one couch and an old TV on a crate, for heaven's sake. Where was her parents? I could have sworn that someone had mentioned a brother as well, but Winter hadn't said one word about him. I place my hands into my pant pockets and begin to saunter back towards my car, deep in thought. My mate, or the girl who would have been my mate, was in danger, and although I had rejected her, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her. Not now. I glance back at the house and shiver. It seemed cold somehow, completely lacking in everything that makes a house a home. I get into the driver's seat and slowly pull out, careful to watch for incoming traffic as I make my way back to the pack house. I suspect my mother is going to interrogate me the instant I get home, most probably worried out of her mind because I'm laid back. I sigh. She's so overprotective of me, like all mothers are. So why wasn't Winter's? Surely no mother would fail to see the bruises on their daughter's body? Did she have a mother? Now that I thought about it, Winter had muttered something about a father but not anything about a mother. I groan. Stop thinking about her already, I scold myself, and my wolf just sniggers at me. Shut it, I tell him fiercely, but he just grins even more. You didn't completely sever the mate bond. Strange. It only happens when you are not 100% sure you want to reject someone. I guess you had some doubts, huh, Jonathan, he told me smugly, and I scowled. Had I had the tiniest bit of doubt in my mind when I rejected her? Was there still a mate bond drawing me to Winter? Was my wolf telling the truth? There was no reason for him to lie though, and I ponder what to do now. I can't bring myself to reject her a second time, not when I was already thinking constantly about her. Besides, how do you tell someone your heart wasn't fully in the rejection without giving them some sort of sense of false hope? I would deal with it later. I pull up at the pack house and look into the angry, blazing eyes of my mother. I flinch. She looks angry. Damian POV. I am hanging around behind the school building, waiting for my mates and subtly smoking when I hear the snooty cheerleaders coming past. Christ, I can't stand the shallow, vain creatures. For some reason Jessica keeps trying to search me out, and I know it's because she likes me. A shame, because I really dislike her. I press my back against the brick wall and pray I'm not seen as they walk past. I gave that what for, Jessica says, flipping her long hair and inspecting her fingernails. We sure did. Another girl laughs, and I wonder which girl they are talking about. Jessica had so many enemies it was hard to keep track of them. Did you see how she couldn't even get up? Jessica sneers, and the girls all laugh out loud as I roll my eyes. Clearly they'd beaten up some poor girl in a pack. It was pure cowardice to gang up on a single person, but then since when was Jessica fair in anything she did? She deserved it. That alpha Jonathan is going to be mine, and she needs to learn her place, Jessica huffs. So this was over, the alpha now attending our school. Why am I not surprised? Jessica now has him in her sights. She certainly got around, that was for sure. I heard he rejected her. Of course he did. An alpha is never going to be with a lowly shifter such as her. It's just my luck that they've stopped right in front of me, gossiping in their group, their backs turned to me. I silently swear. If I move I'll be noticed. I'm stuck where I am until they choose to leave, which judging by the way they were talking to each other wasn't likely to be anytime soon. I sigh. They are still talking in those loud, high-pitched annoying voices that I swear every cheerleader in the school possesses. She's so disgusting, she's pathetic, she didn't even try to fight back, that's because she's weak. An alpha needs a strong Luna by their side, like me, Jessica declares, and I almost scoff as the other girls begin to agree. Spineless cowards, every single one of them. Do you think we'll be punished? As if she's going to tell. How many times have we heard her and she's said nothing, just stood there and taken it. Besides, the principal is a friend of my parents', there's no way he would dare try and do anything. Now I'm beginning to become suspicious, pressing myself against the wall and venturing slightly closer in order to hear their whispers. I wonder if she's still in the classroom. Do you think we should go back? Jessica looked incredulous. I'm not going back to check on her. Someone will find her eventually, she said dismissively, and her friends fall silent. Winter will be fine, Jessica says, beginning to walk to the car as her little clique group follows, waving goodbyes and blowing kisses to each other. It's nauseating. She'd said Winter was beaten up. I hesitate, but this time I can't help myself and begin to turn towards the classrooms. One of my friends runs up. Just so you know, Winter was taken to the nurse's office, he says with a sly grin, thinking that I won't care as usual. He's in for a shock because I instantly take off in a run, heading straight to where Winter had been taken, crashing through the door and effectively startling the nurse. Where is she? I growl, my hands clenching into fists. The nurse fairly gapes at me as my eyes sweep around the room, narrowing in on the bed which was empty. Surely Winter hadn't walked home? Not in her condition. Are you talking about Winter? She says timidly, and I give a short nod, impatiently waiting for her to tell me where my little sister has gone. She's gone to the hospital, she offers before her own eyes narrow on me, her arms folded. I flinch from the look on her face. Your sister, she said pointedly, glaring at me, was badly beaten and needs to be checked out. Not only that, she snaps, but she has old bruises over her body. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? She growls, and I feel a sense of remorse and regret. I have no doubts that a lot of the bruises were ones inflicted by me. The nurse knows it too, for she looks at me with nothing but contempt in her eyes. I say nothing. After all, she's right, I have hurt my little sister, and for what? The approval of a drunken father who never even knew we existed half the time? God, I feel sick to my stomach. What have I done? Why had I let father mold me into a monster? I'd failed Winter, and my poor mother would be devastated if she'd seen the way I treated my little sister. I say nothing, however, and hurry out to my car. I get to the hospital, but Winter is gone, apparently having gone home with the alpha of all people. I'm angry that he's been by her side this entire time when I know that it should have been me helping her. Her big brother should be the one looking out for her, and even though I know it's irrational, part of me is going into overprotective mode. I slam my hands down on the steering wheel in frustration. Winter had to be at home, and I start the car, slowly peeling out of the parking lot, my thoughts coming in droves. How did I convince Winter that I would change? She only had my past actions to go on, and I knew that it was going to take a massive effort on my part to show her that I could be the big brother she'd always wanted, could be relied on to be there for her. I would have to beg and work for forgiveness from her, but that seemed only right. God, what had I done? I could blame my father, but I was also equally to blame for my own actions. I should have stopped listening to him by now, started thinking for myself, and refused to do what he wanted. I would never make that mistake again, I decided, just as I pulled my car into the driveway. Winter POV. I'm dreading going into the house after being so late. My father is going to be pissed. Dinner's not on the table, but to my shock the house is pitch black, no lights in the house on at all. Even my brother appears to be missing. I almost shout out hallelujah in my excitement, shuffling along in pain until I reach the kitchen. There's signs father has been home most of the day. Tons of beer bottles, most empty, sitting on the old, faded, wooden dining table. I sigh. If he's gone out, it's most likely he's gone to the pub. Which means he won't be home until late, with luck well after I've gone to bed. It's almost as if the moon goddess decided to give me a helping hand, and I can't help but begin to hum under my breath despite everything. Then I hear it. The smallest sound but loud enough to cause me to freeze in terror, the creak of the front door as it opens, and I turn in hesitation, praying it's not my father. I haven't had enough time to start dinner yet and I could feel my body beginning to tremble, my hands shaking as I stand and wait to see who it is. Winter, I hear my brothers shout and my heart begins to beat at a normal pace again. I could handle Damian, but I wondered what he wanted and why he wasn't out smoking weed with my friends. "Where are you?" he growls. In the kitchen, I squeak, feeling timid like a small mouse must feel. I hear his footsteps approaching, loud on the wooden floors of the living room. He almost barrels inside and then stops, folding his arms and glaring at me. I'm a bit confused. Had I done something to upset him? Or was he just finding any excuse to wind me up? "You," he snaps, waving his arms around. "Why didn't you tell me or ring me?" I blink. Tell him what? I'm completely puzzled. Instead he says heatedly, "I overhear that Jessica bragging about how she's beaten up my little sister and her cheerleader friends helped her." I say nothing, I'm absolutely speechless and confused about why he's angry with me. Since when did he give a damn about me or what I went through every day? I feel nothing but emptiness inside of me and rising anger. "How bad is it?" he says tightly, and I still, biting my lip and looking away from him. As if I'm going to answer him. He's impatient though, and before I can stop him, he's lifting up my jumper and shirt while I struggle helplessly. There's nothing I can do, he's much stronger than me, and I see his eyes widen as he takes in the bandage as well as the yellowing of old bruises all over my ribcage and stomach. I blush as I realize how far he's pulled them up and quickly tug them down as his eyes turn black. I can't take it anymore. "Why do you care?" I spit out, folding my arms and trying not to wince at the pain. "Since when did you ever give a damn about me, your little sister? You've made my life a living hell, Damian, you have no right to pretend to care now." I'm almost shouting by now, and my brother, to give him credit, doesn't interrupt me. Instead he waits until I'm done before speaking, in a gentle voice instead of an angry one, his hands held out as though begging for forgiveness. "Winter," he says, almost pleading with me as I raise my eyebrows, "I know what I've done to you is wrong, and believe me, it's been bad. I have always hated you for killing our mother." He trails off and I interrupt him. "I didn't kill our mother," I almost scream, hysterical, tears flowing down my cheeks as I begin to sob. It's always the same thing with him and father, blaming me for something that was completely out of my control. "I know," he shouts back, frustrated, and I gape at him. Had he just said that? After all these years, was he finally waking up to the fact that I'd just been an innocent child who couldn't do anything to help mother? I'm suspicious. "I've spent years listening to father ramble on about it being your fault," he snaps, running a hand through his hair impatiently, "and because I was young, and I was angry, I believed him when he turned on you. So help me God, I let that he lie to me and manipulate me. There's no excuse for what I've done to you, Winter, I know that, and I don't expect you to forgive me instantly," he says irritably, "but at least hear me out." Oh, I'm hearing him all right, but I'm not about to let my guard down. I've done it too many times before and been disappointed, but some part of me, a very small part, wants to believe him. Wants her big brother to be telling the truth. I've been thinking a lot lately. He exhales and glances at me looking very guilty, and I can't stand to hurt you anymore. If Mum was still alive she'd kick me for what Father and I have been doing to you. She'd kill me and I'd deserve it. I've failed her by failing you, he said urgently, and I feel my heart skip a beat. He seemed so genuine, so sincere that a tiny spark of hope lights inside of me. I'm not going to expect you to believe me, but I'm going to show you just how much I can change, he continues. I want to be a big brother and not a coward who listens to his father instead of thinking for himself. I'm starting to wonder if he smoked some weed and mixed it with drugs. This wasn't anything I would ever have expected in a million years of my brother. It seemed too good to be true. I heave a big sigh. Actions meant more than words, and I decided I would wait and see what he'd do next. We both stiffen as the front door opens, and I can't help myself, my body shaking instinctively as I smell the disgusting odor of our father as he approaches the kitchen, stumbling along, well and truly inebriated. To my astonishment, Damian pushes me behind him and faces Father, who merely shoots him a glance. Out of my way, boy, he snaps. I want another beer, he slurs, and Damian seems to tense. I'm praying that there isn't going to be a fight. Then Father starts to stumble and Damian reluctantly catches him as he falls unconscious in his arms, giving me a disgusted look. Drunk as a skunk like usual, he complains, picking him up and placing him on the couch while I watch. Hope he has one hangover when he wakes up, he curses. He looks around the kitchen just as his stomach growls. I wait for him to demand dinner, but instead he surprises me once again. How about I order us both a pizza for dinner? My treat. Winter POV. I started the next morning with a big smile on my face. Last night had been so much fun, laughing and joking with my brother, actually reminiscing about Mum without him getting angry at me. I get dressed and rush downstairs, stopping in my tracks as I spot my father waiting for me. I glance upwards hoping to see Damian, but there's no sign of him and I hesitate, wondering if I should call out for help. But it was also possible that Damian had left for school already, in which case, I was on my own anyway. My father's beady little eyes rest on me and I flinch, smelling his breath and the beer from here. It's repulsive, almost as though he's bathed in it. I stop on the steps, too frightened to make a move, but to my surprise, my father gives me a smile that instantly makes me suspicious. Why was he suddenly in a good mood? Had he maybe gotten another job already? Normally it took him weeks though. Even then, he never smiled at me. My stomach churns with dread. Winter, my father says heartily, and I eye him suspiciously. Yes, I say quietly, my feet still firmly rooted to the ground, my body beginning to tremble in fear. Something was up. He was acting too strange for my liking. You look pale, he says, and I place a hand on my cheek. It's true that I'm pale, but then, other than walking to school and back, I don't really see much sunlight. So being pale was normal for me, not that he'd notice, of course. Or it could be because it felt like all the blood had drained out of my face the second I saw he was home. He comes closer and I instinctively flinch, raising my arm as though to shield off a hit that I suspect is coming. Instead, nothing happens and I place my arm back down, to see a wounded expression on my father's face. I wasn't going to hurt you, he says quietly, and I want so badly to believe him, but nothing on this god-green earth would ever get me to believe my father. Instead, all I can wonder is what he wants. He's never acted this civil to me ever, and, if anything, I'm even more wary of him than before. Come down already, he says slightly irritably, and I exhale, cautiously moving one foot in front of the other, reluctantly making my way down to the foot of the stairs, my heart thudding loudly and quickly in my chest. I wish Damian was here, at least then he'd probably fill me in on what was happening. Kitchen, my father says, and I almost gag as I smelled his breath, saying nothing and walking into the kitchen. I assume that he wants me to prepare breakfast, but to my surprise, he places his hands on my shoulders and forces me to sit at the dining table. I'll make us some toast, he says jovially. Coffee? He asks, and I'm stunned. Had father had a change of mind and decided he was going to stop abusing me? What had brought this on? Was I dreaming? Yes please, I mumble, and he nods, brusquely making one up as I stare down at the table. I feel uncomfortable, awkward even. This is the most I've ever spoken to him in who knows how long, and I'm not quite sure what to say. When he places the toast and coffee in front of me, I inhale deeply, appreciating the strong aroma, giving father a tentative smile as he joins me. Thank you, I whisper, and he nods, biting into his toast. I take a small nibble of mine, feeling emotional. He'd put peanut butter on it, but he'd cut it into triangles, the way I'd like to eat it when mother was still alive. So I was thinking, he says gruffly, staring at his coffee, that maybe today it would be a good idea if you stayed home. You look sickly anyway, he adds. I'm confused. I've never missed a day of school in my life. Not only that, but I felt fine, I wasn't sick at all. I shake my head. I can't miss school, I protest thickly, taking a sip of my coffee. I can't afford to miss any classes, I add, intense, waiting for him to explode. Instead, he just regards me calmly, still drinking, and I pick up my own cup and continue to sip while I wait. I blink. Was it my imagination, or was father looking slightly fuzzy? I shake my head, putting it down to tiredness, my body feeling relaxed. My father looks calm. I'm afraid the school isn't expecting you, he tells me firmly, shaking his own head. I've already called to advise them you're sick and won't be in for the rest of the week, he adds. I'm shocked. Why would you do that, I say slowly, my mouth beginning to feel dry. Well, you're needed elsewhere, he says quietly, and my jaw drops open. I make an attempt to stand, but it's like my limbs refuse to cooperate with me, and I stare at my father, realizing that he's laced my drink with some sort of drug. It's the only explanation I can think of as the room starts to spin around me. Why, I manage to utter as he comes over to me, my body sliding out of the chair onto the ground. I blink, tears from my eyes. How stupid of me to even trust my father for a moment. I should have instantly known something was up. But why had he drugged me? You see, my father says, coming into view, a large grin on his fat, puffy face. I'm in desperate need of money, and last night I was given an offer I just couldn't pass up. What, I mumble, trying to scrabble at the tiles, get a grip on anything that might make my body move. I'm praying for Damian to magically come home, but it's futile. I scream as I feel his foot on my back, squishing me and making it impossible to attempt to move. Well, it came to me that you're a very pretty girl, my father says, and I feel my heart skip a beat. Surely he's not about to? Not to his own daughter. You can make me a lot of money, he says gruffly, and I owe someone money, so it's a win-win for me. He chuckles and I open my mouth, but nothing comes out, my voice merely a croak. I feel defeated. There's no getting out of this situation, and all I can do is lie there completely helpless, my whole body paralyzed and my vision slowly beginning to diminish as blackness began to creep in. I suppose it's only fair to tell you where you are going, Winter, he chuckles, and I feel nothing but hatred towards him. If I could have killed him right then and there, I would have. As it was, I wished I could kick him in the nuts. He leans down and bends close to my ears, his stubble tickling my face as I feel bile rise up in my throat, dreading what he's about to say or tell me. I've sold you, he growls, satisfaction in his voice, to someone who wants to have a lot of fun with you, and when he's done he threatens, then I'll sell you again. You're useless, Worthless, the only thing you're good for is now I've made you one. I wish I could scream, yell, anything but as he moves off of me, the darkness creeps in and I lose whatever hold I have on keeping myself awake, my eyes closing against my will, my breathing beginning to even out, and to my horror, there's now only darkness as I fall unconscious right there on the kitchen floor. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.